Hi everyone. So, for my final project proposal, I am going to be discussing a lesson that I've entitled Historical Figures in Today's Context. The educational problem that my lesson will be addressing is students experiencing static 21st century and anachronistic judgment from not understanding and analyzing historical context as it relates to society. I chose this issue because it's a central problem in the history discipline that is needed for the future success of researching, writing, and limiting stereotypes and bias. Students can become critical analyzers of information that they are researching and form their own thoughts and arguments. And I hope to achieve this through utilizing technology, cooperative learning, and problem solving. So I've detailed three different objectives in this lesson, and each one is an important step within reaching the goal of students avoiding static 21st century and anachronistic judgment. So each objective will scaffold students' understanding of how to apply critical thinking, investigate, connect, and articulate with context within what I'm going to call faction, which I will devote more attention to and cover in the next slide. So, what exactly is a faction lesson? Well, it's the combination of historical facts and research and imaginative fiction. So, the lesson will have students investigate facts about a historical figure that they'll be choosing from a list that I provide, because it's important to have a requirement in ill-structured subjects, as Jonathan says, because there are so many different types of solutions to problems in subjects such as history. So students will take their historical research and apply it as a flexible guide into active and creative thinking. And I believe this will be engaging problem solving because students will be researching these figures who have social activists significance to them. And their 21st century version will have to address a social problem in 21st century context. So overall, this lesson is going to differentiate those contexts for students and hopefully expose bias and stereotypes that don't belong in a certain time period. And essentially, students will be able to activate their prior experience and relate it to their real lives from this generative topic that has multiple entry points. The historical figures that the students will be selecting from to research are going to be, again, social activists throughout United States history. And I chose these figures as the focus because I believe it will elicit students' bias and stereotypes as they're researching together in small groups. So through their dialogue, they can become aware of this. And again, the problem is historical context. So any way that cooperative learning can help expose your implicit bias, it's going to be beneficial for history research and just being a well-rounded human today in the real world. So here are a few figures below, and I purposely chose figures who are not white, heteronormative males because in history there is a major focus on Caucasian male history, and you rarely hear the voices of social activists who have contributed invaluable contributions to our history, and we've inherited benefits from their problem solving in the past. So again, with the faction, we're going to have students select one of these figures and then create a 21st century version who solves or works towards solving a social problem that's inspired by this figure. And another affordance is these figures all have a bountiful amount of research available on them, so there will not be the constraint of researching and not finding any information. So again, giving them a list with figures to choose from, they can avoid that potential problem while they're researching. And what also makes this lesson interesting is it's a combined subject matter. So you may have noticed through me explaining this, it's clearly history, but it's also a combination of social studies. Historical research covers a lot of ground and a lot of different information, perspectives, debates, arguments, and because of this, I believe it's important to provide students with a guide to help their research and give them a clear expectation of what they should be looking for and recording together as a group. And this list still gives them autonomy to look around different resources, and this list is going to apply to both the historical and fiction figures. So as you can see, there are a few different points the students have to hit while also using Chicago Citation, and this information is in the objectives in the second slide. So what I want to bring your attention to is the what problem did they or try to solve and how, which will be for the historical figure, and what problem can they solve in today's context and why. So this question here is key to, again, my central problem of historical context and having students learn how to do that. So hopefully through this guide, this can help the groups work together and have clear expectations. History is a research topic that involves exploring many arguments of primary and secondary sources in databases. Students will be utilizing technology as research and presentation partners to learn with in this lesson. So as you can see, there are 4 different technologies I want to integrate, and the first one being databases. My audience or students are undergraduates, so they should have familiarity coming in to this course. And my second technology is reference management software. And this software essentially helps history students compile research sources with citations and saves their notes. It's also collaborative, so groups working together can work on one source and communicate through this software. I believe this is extremely useful for history students who are dealing with multiple sources and perspectives and arguments, and it helps them stay organized and they can reflect back on their work. So it is a partnership in a sense that it takes some of the cognitive burden while allowing the student to increase their performance. So they're not learning from reference management software, they're learning with it. And the third technology that I'm integrating is either VoiceThreads or Google Slides. It really just depends on how much technology I want students to learn. Google Slides will be easier since these aren't undergraduates who have familiarity with this platform. But essentially, the affordance of both of the softwares is their multimodal qualities, which are going to enrich the presentation experience for sharing and learning the information. And my last software is a learning management software referred to as LMS. And this is typical in many classrooms. It provides additional guidance for students to know submission dates, have more explanation when they're looking for guidelines for clear expectations. And it stores work for later reflection, similar to the reference management software, where you can save notes and email correspondence with classmates and the teacher outside of class. So students who may need more time to reflect on their thoughts are not constrained by 45 minutes in the classroom, and they can reach out to anyone else. And another point I will be getting to later in this presentation and devote more time to it is exit notes. So exit notes are an opportunity for teachers or professors to get students to reflect quickly at the end of class, and the LMS can allow students to write these messages to the professor without revealing their identity, but still having accountability for what they're writing. After reading WISC this past week, I decided to integrate Teaching for Understanding framework within my faction lesson. So as you can see here, I have the 5 different elements for this pedagogy, and I have decided to put in different points that pertain to this framework. First, going with the generative topics. So I believe researching figures and applying it to the real world today is a bottomless inquiry problem-solving activity. There are multiple ways to address these authentic social problems today. And if you noticed on my list guide that students will be using, it has a last point about rewarding further inquiry. So just trying to connect this framework to the guides and resources that I provide to students. And for understanding goals, I do have clear objectives and a goal, and I will share a rubric at the end that details expectations. And for the performance of understanding, it was important that I integrated a creative element into this lesson. So I wanted students to stretch their minds and be engaged, to think about their bias and stereotypes related to real world and how to limit those. It's kind of impossible to eliminate, but if you can limit them by looking at context today and working in groups who, through their multiple perspectives and listening to each other, can help you and you can help them, this can be achieved through cooperative learning and the problem solving. And for the ongoing assessment, the reference management software provides an opportunity for the professor to look at what the students had been researching, compiling, and commenting to each other. So this is an opportunity for formative feedback before the students move on to the 21st century fiction version. And also the exit notes that I mentioned earlier, submitted through LMS, gives the professor an opportunity to gauge what students are thinking, and students can reflect that way after each class. And for the last element in this framework, we have reflective collaborative communities. So I wanted to utilize either voice threads or slides for this, which is collaborative technology where the groups can work together and they can compile their perspectives, research, and creativity to address a problem today. And then they can share this information to the class, and students can reflect on their understanding by seeing other classmates' work. Here is my lesson breakdown. As you can see, it's going to be a 3-day lesson to achieve my central problem. For day 1, I want to have students immediately activate their prior knowledge of the real world and how it relates to their personal experiences, to activate thinking about what a role model is in context today. And then I'll have students move on to group work, and they will then receive that list of the social activist figures in history, and they will build off the do now thinking, which prompts them to think about what makes a role model significant. And then we're going to move on to the group research, integrating the reference management software. And I believe it's important when you're learning a technology to have context behind it and a purpose. So the students researching that figure will be learning the software and also doing the assignment. So that's important. And then we have the exit note. And this is going to be an opportunity for the students to answer a question at the end of class. For example, what are some similarities and differences between your personal role model from the do now and historical figure after doing a little bit of research? So this will have students kind of think about that differentiation again with context of time. And they have homework assignments each night. The first one being to continue researching with the reference management software, which is again a collaborative tool working together. And then the second day, this is the fiction creative part of the faction lesson. So students will come together, reconvene with their thoughts in person, and through their dialogue, hopefully identify bias, anachronistic judgments, stereotypes, and they can fill out the list together and think about what a problem was that was addressed from the figure in the past. And then we move on to create, with the groups that are the same groups create the 21st century fiction version that addresses a problem today. And then students will work on the presentation with the software, giving it context to learn that software. But if it's Google Slides, students should already have prior knowledge on that, but this is an opportunity to brush up if they need it. And then we end with an exit note again. But this time it's what are the similarities and differences between your historic figure and the 21st century version. And this will give the professor a formative assessment opportunity to see where the students are going. And then they have the homework of collaboratively working on the project. So an affordance of using technologies is students can work outside of the classroom with a constraint of 45 minutes together and sharing their ideas on one project so that it has a clear goal. And the third and last day, this is the presentation day. So students will come together, organize their thoughts, last minute touches, and then they present the historical figure and the 21st century version. And they explain the contextual differences and leave a little bit of room for Q&A. And then if possible and time is left, there's a last minute reflection with the whole class to come together and do a little bit more context thinking and talking about issues they encountered or potential topics in the future. And the last assignment, and this is in light of Jonason's article. So when there's active learning, it's important that students have also a reflection assignment with that to gauge understanding and just retained information. So allowing the students to reflect on what they have actively learned. And I'll be giving them the question, how has your research given you a better sense of context regarding how it relates to society? And I believe they'll be prepared for this question through the scaffolding of the activities and also how the exit notes have helped them differentiate context. The exit notes that I've been referring to that are submitted through the LMS come from the theory of writing to learn, which provides students an opportunity to quickly reflect upon what they have learned throughout the day and to gauge their understanding. Exit notes are not supposed to have pressure attached to them, so I believe grading these could be done as complete or incomplete, just to give students a little bit of a push to contribute to filling out an exit note, but not giving them as much pressure by attaching a letter grade to it. This lesson will be assessed by 3 different ways. As you can see, the first is a rubric, which will be on the next slide. And this will measure problem-solving ability through specifically targeting the research of the 2 figures and the end presentation. And then, again, in light of Jonason, we have the 1-page individual reflection paper at the end to measure the students' grasp of the lesson and to see their original thought. And then again, we have the exit notes. These are going to be graded as complete or incomplete, and these will be utilized to have students reflect upon their learning, and professors can read them to gauge understanding. Here is the rubric that I'll be utilizing to assess the research, figures, and presentation. So again, history is an ill-structured problem that has multiple different solutions to the problems that are innate to the subject of history. So developing a rubric is very important just to gauge a student's understanding. It's not about whether the answer is correct or not. It's more so assessing the student's thinking throughout the project, and did they get the concept of removing anachronistic judgment and 21st century bias and stereotypes in their historical context analysis. That's going to be highlighted through the figures. The last slide that I've included is the caveats to this lesson. So what I'm looking for here is effective feedback on if my faction lesson is going to work toward my end goal of having students be aware of anachronistic judgment and how it can affect their historical analysis, research and writing specifically. So one thing that I am worried about is my project integrating too much technology? I believe it's not, but it's always beneficial to hear others' perspectives on this. And I wonder if 3 days is enough to effectively learn this complex central skill that is considered a through-line skill for WISC because it applies to grander, larger goals throughout the discipline. So if you do not understand historical context, you cannot engage in completing historical research or writing projects effectively without having your bias and stereotypes being included